"Shut up, you useless old man. Nobody wants to hear your nonsense." Those cruel words came from my own son's mouth as his hand forcibly covered mine in front of 40 guests. Everyone laughed. I remained silent. But that night, I made the most important decision of my life. My name is David Miller. I am 68 years old and have been a widower for 3 years. My wife, Sarah Adams, passed away in October 2022 after 46 years of marriage. She was the love of my life, my loyal companion, the woman who stood by me when we had nothing and celebrated with me every achievement of our company. That Saturday night, October 26th, 2024, I decided to host a special dinner at my home. To commemorate what would have been our 49th wedding anniversary, I invited 40 people, family, close friends, some former business partners, and neighbors who knew Sarah well. I wanted to honor her memory, share beautiful stories, and recall the moments we built together. I hired an elegant catering service. I decorated the living room with our photographs from different eras and prepared a small emotional speech I had written during the previous nights. Everything was perfect. The table looked beautiful, with white tablecloths, scented candles, and Sarah's favorite flowers, white roses and lilies. My son, Alex Miller, arrived with his wife, Nicole Smith, around 8 p.m. He is 42 years old. He holds a nominal position within my import company, although in reality, he does little more than show up twice a week. Nicole is 39, always impeccably dressed, always with that smile that never quite reaches her eyes. I greeted them with the same affection as always, though lately I had noticed a certain cold distance in their visits. The dinner unfolded amidst pleasant conversations and nostalgic laughter. After 10 p.m., when everyone had finished the main course, I stood up and gently tapped my glass with a fork to ask for attention. The murmur gradually subsided. I began to speak about Sarah, about how we met in 1976 in a small bookstore in downtown Chicago, where she worked as a sales clerk. I recounted how I fell in love with her clear laugh, her way of talking about books with contagious passion, how it took me 3 months to gather the courage to ask her out for coffee. I was reaching the most emotional part of my story, remembering our first date in Central Park under a clear spring sky, when I heard Alex's sharp voice interrupt from his chair. "Dad, that's enough. Everyone knows that boring story." There was an awkward silence. Some guests lowered their gaze to their plates. I tried to regain my composure with a diplomatic smile, but I had barely uttered 3 more words when my son abruptly rose from his seat. "Shut up, you useless old man. Nobody wants to hear your nonsense," he shouted as he walked toward me with determined steps. Before I could react, his hand forcibly covered my mouth, pushing my head slightly back. His fingers pressed my lips with a contained violence that left me paralyzed. It wasn't a playful gesture. It was a calculated humiliation, executed with absolute contempt in front of 40 witnesses. The room erupted in nervous laughter. Some people applauded, believing it was part of some family joke. Nicole smiled from her seat with barely disguised satisfaction. I remained completely motionless, feeling the heat of shame rise from my neck to my cheeks. Alex kept his hand over my mouth for a few seconds that felt eternal, staring intently into my eyes with a coldness I had never seen in him. Then he removed his hand, returned to his seat, and continued eating his dessert as if nothing had happened. I didn't say another word all night. I sat in my chair and remained silent as conversations timidly resumed around me. But something had changed within me at that precise moment. I felt no blind rage or desire to shout. I felt an absolute clarity, a cold lucidity I hadn't experienced in years. I watched my son finish his dessert, laugh naturally at some joke someone told, and kiss Nicole's cheek with feigned tenderness. As the guests began to depart between 11 p.m. and midnight, I memorized every detail. Who had laughed? Who had looked down in embarrassment? Who approached me afterward to offer a compassionate handshake? Alex and Nicole left without even saying goodbye, simply disappearing among the first groups to abandon the house. That night, when I finally closed the door after the last guest, I went up to my bedroom and sat on the bed I had shared with Sarah for decades. I didn't cry. I didn't break down. I simply understood with absolute certainty that this public humiliation had revealed my son's true nature. And I also understood that I, David Miller, was not the useless old man he believed me to be. I was a man with 68 years of experience, 45 years building a business empire, and an observational capacity that Alex had just gravely underestimated. That night, I made the most important decision of the last years of my life. In the days following that humiliation, I dedicated myself to reflecting deeply on the path I had taken to reach this moment. I needed to understand exactly when my son had transformed into the despicable man who covered my mouth in front of 40 people. The answer required reviewing decades of sacrifices, decisions, and signals I had perhaps ignored out of paternal love. My import company was founded in January 1979 with an initial capital of barely $300 that Sarah and I had saved for 3 years by working second jobs. I rented a small 800 square feet warehouse on the outskirts of Chicago, without heating, with leaks in the roof, and an improvised office consisting of a used desk and 2 plastic chairs. The first few years were brutally hard. I worked 18 hours a day, personally loading boxes, negotiating with Italian suppliers in broken Italian, sleeping some nights in the warehouse when orders piled up. Sarah was pregnant with Alex during those first months of the company. I remember perfectly how she organized orders from home, wrote invoices by hand with her perfect handwriting, and prepared sandwiches that I ate standing between one client and another. When Alex was born in September 1982, we had already managed to move the company to a larger warehouse and hire our first 3 employees. By then, we were importing textile products from Italy, France, and Portugal, with an annual turnover that had grown to $3,000. The sacrifices for Alex began in his childhood. While other parents sent their children to public schools, I paid $15,000 annual tuition at St. Patrick's School, an elite private institution where the children of entrepreneurs and diplomats studied. I wanted to give him opportunities I never had. When he turned 16, I gave him an imported BMW 3 Series that cost me $55,000. Money I could have reinvested in new machinery for the company. At 18, I funded a full-year academic exchange in London, spending $45,000 on tuition, accommodation, and personal expenses. During his university studies in business administration, Alex lived in a 2-bedroom apartment that I rented for $12,200 per month. He drove the car I had bought him, used credit cards connected to my bank accounts, and received a monthly allowance of $12,000 for various expenses. He never worked part-time, never knew the feeling of counting pennies to buy food, never experienced the anguish of not knowing if he could pay next month's rent. I made sure his life was perfectly comfortable while he focused on his studies. Upon graduating in 2005, I immediately offered him a management position in the company with an initial salary of $5,000 per month, far superior to what any recent graduate could expect in the job market. By then, my business was already turning over $2.5 million annually. We had expanded our imports to include German industrial machinery, and I employed 27 people. Alex started working in the commercial department, though it quickly became clear that his interest in the technical aspects of the business was superficial. In 2016, at 34 years old, Alex announced that he would marry Nicole Smith, a woman he had met at an exclusive gym in an upscale neighborhood. She worked as a personal image consultant for executives, charging rates ranging from $400 to $700 per session. From the first moment, I noticed something artificial in her way of interacting with me. Her smiles seemed calculated. Her questions about the company sounded more like investigation than genuine interest, and her way of talking about money revealed a purely materialistic mindset. The wedding cost $100,000. I paid for everything. The banquet for 150 guests at a luxury hotel, the wedding dress designed by a renowned designer, the 3-week honeymoon in the Maldives, the white gold diamond rings, the professional photographer, the orchestra, the flowers, the transportation. Alex did not contribute a single cent. He simply assumed I would take care of all expenses. And when I tried to suggest a more modest celebration, Nicole interceded, arguing that a wedding only happens once in a lifetime and should be memorable. After the marriage, the changes in Alex gradually became more evident. His visits home became less frequent. When he did come, he spoke mainly about risky investment projects, luxury cars he wanted to buy, and larger houses he had seen in decorating magazines. His work at the company became increasingly irregular. He arrived late, left early, delegated responsibilities to other employees, and when I tried to discuss important business matters, he responded with phrases like, "I'll handle it, Dad. Don't worry about those things." Sarah's death in October 2022 marked a definitive turning point. During the funeral, Alex was more concerned with answering work calls than with accompanying my grief. In the following weeks, as I struggled with loneliness and depression, his visits were reduced to sporadic appearances where he arrived in a hurry, superficially inquired about my health, and left citing urgent commitments. Nicole practically disappeared from my life. The woman who for years had feigned affection for her mother-in-law now considered it unnecessary to maintain that facade. Today, in 2024, my company is worth approximately $4,000. I have 45 employees, exclusive import contracts with manufacturers from 12 European countries, and a business reputation built over 4.5 decades of honest work. My family home, where Sarah and I raised Alex, is valued at $850,000, according to the last official appraisal. I also own savings accounts totaling $700,000, the result of years of living modestly and reinvesting profits. Alex knows these approximate figures. He knows that one day he will inherit everything I have built. But what he doesn't understand is that money only has value when it has been earned through effort and managed responsibly. For 42 years, he has lived like a prince without his own kingdom, enjoying privileges he never had to conquer, developing a sense of entitlement that has turned him into the arrogant man who publicly humiliated me. Now I understand that that night of October 26th was not a fit of bad temper. It was the natural manifestation of decades of accumulated resentment towards the father who controlled him, towards the old man who didn't understand modern times, towards the human obstacle that stood between him and an inheritance he considered his by divine right. But what Alex doesn't know is that that useless old man had learned to be very patient and very observant during 45 years of building an empire from scratch. The 5 days following that disastrous dinner were extraordinarily revealing. Alex and Nicole began to visit me with an unusual frequency that immediately raised my suspicions. Before the incident, weeks would pass without them appearing at my house. Now, suddenly, they came every afternoon with different excuses: to bring me prepared food, to check if I needed anything from the supermarket, to ask about my blood pressure medication. On Monday, October 28th, just 2 days after the disaster, they arrived around 6 p.m. Nicole carried a bag with containers of homemade food that she had clearly bought at a restaurant because she had never cooked anything in her life. They sat with me in the living room and started with seemingly innocent questions about my daily routine. "Dad, are you sleeping well?" Alex asked with a worried tone that sounded completely false. "Don't you feel lonely in this big house?" Nicole added, looking around, evaluating the space as if she were a real estate agent. I limited myself to responding in monosyllables, acting a little more tired than usual. I told them that the nights were indeed long, that sometimes I forgot whether I had eaten lunch or not, and that the stairs were becoming increasingly difficult for me to climb. I saw them exchange quick, almost imperceptible glances, full of meaning. Alex nodded slightly to Nicole, who immediately changed the subject to talk about assisted living facilities she had seen advertised in magazines. On Tuesday afternoon, they returned with colorful brochures for luxury senior care centers. Nicole spread them out on the dining table with rehearsed enthusiasm, pointing out photographs of spacious rooms, well-maintained gardens, smiling medical staff. "Look, Dad, this place in an affluent suburb has 24-hour nursing service, recreational activities, transportation for outings," she explained, while I pretended to examine the images with interest. Alex added, "Living alone at your age is dangerous. You could fall, and no one would know for hours." I nodded slowly, murmuring that perhaps they were right, that the house was indeed too big for me alone. I watched them visibly relax. Nicole touched my hand with false tenderness and said, "Don't worry about the money. We'll take care of all the paperwork. You just have to rest and let us take care of you." The way she pronounced "we'll take care of you" chilled my blood. She wasn't talking about caring for me. She was talking about controlling me. On Wednesday, during their third consecutive visit, I heard them talking on the phone in the hallway while I was supposedly in the bathroom. Alex had answered a call, and his voice echoed clearly through the thin walls of my old house. "No, he still hasn't signed anything, but he's considering it. The old man is losing his mind. He gets confused with dates and names. It's only a matter of time before it's obvious to everyone that he can't handle his affairs." There was a pause while the person on the other end spoke. Then Alex continued, "Exactly. Once he's admitted, we can proceed with the full power of attorney. My lawyer says it's simple if we present appropriate medical evaluations." I returned to the living room without a sound and sat in my chair as if I hadn't heard anything. Alex entered moments later with his best smile of filial concern. That night, after they left, I checked my important documents stored in the study. I wanted to verify if anyone had tried to access them. Everything seemed to be in order, but I noticed that some papers were slightly disorganized, not in the meticulous order I always maintained. On Thursday, they visited me again, this time with a supposed doctor friend of theirs named Dr. Johnson. He was a man in his 50s, professionally dressed, who asked my permission to ask me some questions about my general health. I agreed with apparent cordiality. He asked about my recent memory, my ability to manage finances, my sleep habits. I deliberately answered with a certain vagueness, confusing minor dates, forgetting neighbors' names, behaving like someone in the early stages of mild cognitive decline. The doctor exchanged another significant glance with Alex. "Sir, I'd like to schedule some more comprehensive exams at my office, just to make sure everything is all right," he said, in a paternal tone. I meekly accepted, knowing perfectly well that those exams would be designed to justify a declaration of incapacity. When they left, I heard from my window as Nicole quietly told the doctor, "How long do you think the process will take?" The answer was inaudible, but her satisfied smile gave me all the necessary information. On Friday night, Alex arrived alone, sat opposite me in the living room with a serious expression, and held my hands in his with theatrical affection. "Dad, I know these days have been confusing for you. Mum would have wanted me to take proper care of you. This house is too much responsibility. The neighbors have told me they've seen you disoriented in the garden late at night." That was completely false. I never went out into the garden at night, but I didn't contradict him. I let him continue with his invented narrative. "I've been thinking," he continued, squeezing my hands with calculated pressure, "that perhaps we should consider selling this property. The money could be invested in your professional care, and you wouldn't have to worry about maintenance, taxes, all those complicated things you shouldn't handle alone anymore." There was the true intention finally exposed. They didn't just want to institutionalize me, they wanted to sell my house, control my money, reduce me to a dependent old man, while they freely managed the assets I had built for 45 years. I pretended to consider his words with a confused expression. "I don't know, Alex. This house holds so many memories of your mother," I murmured weakly. He smiled condescendingly. "Exactly why, Dad. The memories are hurting you. You need to start a new stage without so much emotional weight." Translation: we need to liquidate assets before you decide to donate something to charity or spend money on things that don't benefit our plans. When he finally left that night, I sat in the darkness of the living room for 2 hours, processing every detail of the last 5 days. The excessive visits, the directed questions, the residence brochures, the complicit doctor, the pressure to sell the house. Everything was part of a meticulously designed plan to strip me of my autonomy, my assets, and my dignity. But they had made a fatal error. They assumed I was truly the confused old man I was pretending to be. They didn't realize that every question, every complicit glance, every private phone conversation had been observed and memorized by someone who had spent decades negotiating with men far more cunning than them. It was time to move from observation to action. On Saturday morning, after Alex and Nicole completed their week of manipulative visits, I decided to conduct a thorough review of all my important documents. I have a safe installed in the floor of my study, hidden under a Persian rug that Sarah and I bought during a trip to Europe in 1993. Few know of its existence. Alex never showed interest in the study, considering it a boring room full of old papers and dusty filing cabinets. I opened the safe with the combination only I know and took out folders meticulously organized by category: bank documents, property deeds, business contracts, current will, insurance policies. I started by reviewing the bank statements of my three main accounts. The checking account at a major bank, where I deposit my pension and handle daily expenses, the savings account at another bank with $320,000 accumulated over decades, and the business account at a commercial bank directly linked to import operations. While examining the movements of the last 6 months, I found something deeply disturbing. In the savings account, there were 3 rejected transfer attempts. The first dated August 23, 2024, for $60,000. The second on September 16th for $90,000. The third on October 11th, just 2 weeks before the disastrous dinner, for $140,000. All 3 attempts had been automatically blocked by the bank's security system due to irregularities in the authorized signature. I immediately called my branch manager, Raymond Davis, with whom I have maintained a professional relationship for 22 years. It was Saturday, but I had his personal number for emergencies. He answered on the 4th ring. "Mr. Miller, what a surprise to hear from you on a weekend," he said, with genuine cordiality. I explained that I had detected suspicious movements and needed detailed information. His tone instantly changed to professional concern. "Mr. Miller, I tried to contact you 3 months ago about that exact issue, but your son told me you were resting at a country house and that he would handle any urgent matters," Raymond explained. My blood ran cold. I had never gone to any country house. The 3 transfer attempts came with documentation seemingly signed by you, but our security department detected discrepancies in the handwritten signature. We compared it with the signatures registered in our system, and the slant of certain letters did not match. By protocol, we blocked the operations immediately. I asked him to send me certified copies of all that fraudulent documentation by mail. Raymond agreed and added, "Mr. Miller, I must inform you that 2 weeks ago we also received a request to add your son as a co-owner with full powers over your account. That request was also rejected because it required your physical presence at the branch with 2 witnesses, something that never happened." I thanked him for his professional diligence and hung up, feeling a mixture of contained fury and validation of my suspicions. I continued reviewing documents. Among the folders, I found something even more alarming: a copy of a medical power of attorney in my name that I had never signed. The document was dated October the 5th, 2024, and granted Alex Miller full powers to make medical decisions on my behalf, including authorizations for admission to psychiatric or geriatric institutions. The signature was a rather convincing imitation of mine, but I recognized my own handwriting after 68 years of using it. This was not mine. The notary seal appeared authentic at first glance, but upon examining the details, I noticed irregularities. The notary registration number ended in a sequence that did not follow the standard format used in my state. I photographed the document with my mobile phone from multiple angles. This forged paper explained the visit of the supposed Dr. Johnson. Alex needed to build a medical history to justify the use of that fraudulent power of attorney. I kept digging through folders and found more incriminating evidence. A preliminary purchase agreement for my family home dated September 30th, 2024, with a real estate agency. The document specified a sale price of $780,000, notably lower than the real valuation of $850,000 according to official appraisals. The seller's signature, supposedly mine, was another forgery. The buyer appeared as to be determined. but the real estate agent's commission was calculated on the total amount, $45,000 payable, at closing. The most revealing part of the preliminary contract was a handwritten clause in the margin that read, "Seller, to be moved to assisted living before closing. Authorized contact, Alex Miller." There was the whole plan documented in black and white. Sell my house below its real value, pocket the difference, institutionalize me in some expensive residence where my money would evaporate in inflated monthly fees, and control every dollar of the remaining assets through forged legal powers. I carefully stored all the evidence, photographing each page before returning them to the safe. I needed professional legal advice, but not just any lawyer. I needed someone absolutely trustworthy, someone who knew my character well enough to understand that I was not experiencing senile paranoia, but facing a real and documented family conspiracy. I took my phone and dialed the number of Thomas Benson, my friend since 1992, when he handled the purchase of my second business warehouse. Thomas is 65 years old, a senior partner in a respected law firm in an upscale financial district, and most importantly, a man of unwavering principles who had known Alex since childhood. If anyone could help me navigate this legal nightmare, it was him. "David, long time no hear," he replied warmly. I told him I urgently needed to meet, that I had discovered serious situations related to my son and required confidential legal advice. His tone immediately became serious. "Are you in physical danger?" he asked, directly. I assured him I was not, but that I did face significant financial and legal threats. We agreed to meet the following Monday, first thing in the morning, at his office, with express instructions not to discuss the meeting with anyone. I spent the rest of the weekend chronologically organizing all the evidence: bank statements with fraudulent transfer attempts, forged medical power of attorney, preliminary real estate sales contract, detailed notes on the telephone conversations I had overheard, precise descriptions of Alex and Nicole's behavior during their manipulative visits. I created a timeline that showed how each of their actions was part of a coordinated plan to strip me of autonomy and assets. I also drafted a personal document narrating the public humiliation of October 26th, explaining how that incident had been the catalyst that made me pay attention to previous suspicious behaviors that I had rationalized as genuine filial concern. Now, I saw with absolute clarity that Alex's arrogance that night had not been an isolated outburst. It had been the true expression of his contempt for the father who represented the only obstacle between him and millions of dollars. Monday would arrive, and I would be prepared to launch a methodical legal counteroffensive that would protect everything Sarah and I had built during almost 5 decades of joint work. On Sunday night, around 10:30, I heard my doorbell. I wasn't expecting visitors at that hour. I looked through the peephole and saw my granddaughter, Valerie, standing under the porch light, her eyes red, hugging herself against the November chill. I opened the door immediately, and she practically threw herself into my arms, sobbing. "Grandpa, I need to talk to you. I couldn't wait until tomorrow," she said tearfully as I guided her to the living room. Valerie is 16, in her senior year of high school, and has always been a sensible and mature girl for her age. Seeing her in such a state of distress deeply alarmed me. I prepared her a hot cup of tea with honey, just as Sarah used to make for her when she was little, and waited patiently for her to calm down enough to speak. "I heard Dad and Mom arguing this afternoon in their bedroom," she began in a trembling voice. "I was in my room doing homework when they started shouting. Mom was furious because Dad had paid $900 to someone named Dr. Carter for a fake medical document. She said it was too much money and they could have gotten something cheaper. My heart raced. The name was different from Dr. Johnson they had brought to my house, which meant they had multiple doctors involved in their fraudulent scheme. Valerie continued recounting the conversation she had overheard, hidden behind her door. Alex had responded to Nicole that the money was necessary because they needed legitimate medical documentation, certifying my supposed cognitive incapacity. According to him, once they had those papers, they could accelerate the institutionalization process and proceed with the sale of my house before I complicated things by donating money to charities or spending it on foolishness. Dad literally said, "We need to act fast before the old man donates everything to charity or wastes it on silly things. Once he's institutionalized, everything will be ours and no one will be able to question us," Valerie repeated with impressive accuracy, wiping away her tears with the back of her hand. Mom asked how long the complete legal process would take, and Dad replied that his lawyer estimated between 3 and 6 months, depending on whether you resisted or not. The girl burst into tears again. "Grandpa, I didn't know any of this. I thought their visits were because they were genuinely worried about you after Grandma died. But now I understand it was all a lie. They just want your money. They don't care about you at all." I hugged her as she released all her accumulated anguish. I felt a mixture of fury towards my son and protective tenderness towards this girl who had clearly inherited her grandmother's noble heart. After several minutes, Valerie calmed down enough to continue. She told me she had also heard Nicole mention something about a buyer interested in the house, someone willing to pay $780,000 without asking complicated questions about the owner's situation. Alex had celebrated that figure, saying it was enough to cover the initial costs of institutionalization and leave them a considerable margin for personal investments. "They also said something about your bank accounts," Valerie added in a firmer voice now, wiping away her tears definitively. Dad was annoyed because the bank had blocked 3 transfers he tried to make. He said the manager was a busybody who should mind his own business. Mom suggested changing banks once they had full legal power over your finances. I asked her if there were any more details she remembered. Valerie nodded and pulled out her mobile phone. "I recorded part of the conversation," she whispered, showing me the device. "I know it's wrong to spy on my parents, but something inside me told me I needed proof of what they were planning." She had an audio recording of almost 4 minutes, where Alex and Nicole's voices were clearly heard, discussing specific amounts, legal deadlines, and strategies to minimize any resistance from my part. At that moment, I understood that Valerie had not only brought me valuable information, she had provided additional evidence that perfectly complemented the fraudulent documentation I had discovered in my safe. This 16-year-old girl had demonstrated more moral integrity in one afternoon than her father in his entire adult life. "Grandpa, there's something else you need to know," Valerie said, with a somber expression. "I heard Dad on the phone yesterday with someone about evaluating your mental state. He mentioned they needed evidence of erratic behavior, confusion, significant memory lapses. He told that person that you were already showing clear signs of senile dementia and that it would be easy to get a judicial declaration of incapacity." I remained silent, processing all this information. Alex was not only forging documents, he was actively building a false narrative about my supposed mental incompetence, probably sharing lies with doctors, lawyers, and acquaintances to create a social consensus that would support his criminal plans. I took Valerie's hands in mine and looked her directly in the eyes. Listen closely, darling. What you are doing requires great courage. Your father is my son, and I know this is tearing you apart inside, but I want you to know something important. You are not responsible for his actions. The decisions he has made are his and his alone. She nodded slowly, new tears rolling down her cheeks. I then told her about my own discoveries of the last 48 hours, the fraudulent bank transfers, the forged medical power of attorney, the preliminary house sale contract. Her expression changed from sadness to absolute horror. How can someone do this to their own father? She asked in a broken voice. I had no satisfactory answer to that question. I only knew that the man I had raised, educated, and unconditionally supported for 42 years had become someone I no longer recognized. Grandpa, what are you going to do? Valerie asked with genuine concern. I explained that I had a meeting scheduled with my lawyer the next day, that I was organizing all the evidence, that I would take legal action to protect my assets and my autonomy. She looked at me with admiration, mixed with relief. Can I help you with anything? Do you need me to testify about what I heard? I told her that her testimony could be valuable later, but for now, the most important thing was for her to stay safe and not reveal to her parents that we had spoken. Act normally when you're home. Don't let them suspect you know anything. Can you do that? Valerie nodded with determination. For you, Grandpa, I can do anything. Before leaving, Valerie hugged me tightly and whispered, Grandma would be very proud of you. She always said you were the most honorable man she had ever known. Those words broke my heart and filled me with strength simultaneously. Sarah would have been devastated by what Alex had become, but she would also have completely approved of the steps I was about to take. That night, after Valerie left, I added her revelations and the audio recording to my evidence file. I was no longer alone in this. I had a young but credible witness, someone with no hidden motives, someone who simply loved her grandfather enough to risk her relationship with her own parents to protect him. I decided at that moment that when all this was over, when the legal storm passed and the consequences fell upon Alex, I would ensure that Valerie knew that her future was protected. She was the only one who had proven to deserve the legacy that Sarah and I had built. On Monday, November the 4th, I arrived at Thomas Benson's office at 9 a.m. sharp, carrying a leather briefcase that contained all the evidence organized in labeled folders. His office is located in a stately building on a prestigious city avenue with high ceilings and large windows overlooking an interior courtyard filled with plants. The receptionist recognized me immediately and led me directly to his private office without making me wait. Thomas stood up from his solid mahogany desk to greet me with a sincere hug. We have known each other for 32 years, and in all that time, he had aged with dignity. Completely white hair, deep wrinkles that spoke of decades of smiling, but eyes still sharp as razors when analyzing complex legal situations. David, you look worried. Sit down and tell me everything without omitting any detail, he said, pointing to 2 leather armchairs next to a low table. For the next 45 minutes, I chronologically recounted every event from the public humiliation of October 26th to Valerie's nocturnal visit. I spread all the evidence on the table. Copies of the bank statements with rejected transfer attempts, photographs of the forged medical power of attorney, the preliminary real estate sales contract, my detailed notes on the overheard conversations, and finally, the audio file that Valerie had recorded on her mother's phone. Thomas examined each document with professional meticulousness, taking notes in a legal pad, asking specific questions about dates and amounts. When I finished my story, he leaned back in his armchair with a grave expression. "David, this is much more serious than I imagined over the phone. We are not talking about a common family conflict. We are facing multiple crimes: forgery of public documents, attempted fraud, possible conspiracy to deprive a person of liberty through fraudulent institutionalization. Alex could face between 3 and 6 years in prison if the district attorney's office decides to proceed criminally." The severity of his tone impacted me. A part of me still harbored hope that this could be resolved in a less dramatic way, perhaps with a family confrontation that would make Alex see reason. But Thomas quickly dispelled any illusion of simple reconciliation. "Listen closely, my friend. Your son did not commit impulsive errors of judgment. He methodically planned a complex criminal scheme for months. He paid $9,500 for false medical documentation. He forged your signature on multiple occasions. He negotiated the sale of your property without authorization. This is not a wake-up call he needs. He is a criminal who must face severe legal consequences." I nodded slowly, feeling the weight of those words. Thomas continued, "Now, regarding protecting your assets and autonomy, we have several legal options. The most robust would be to create an irrevocable trust, what we technically call a family trust. Basically, you would transfer your main assets to a separate legal structure where you maintain control during your lifetime, but you clearly establish who inherits and under what conditions after your passing." He explained that this type of structure would shield my assets against any attempt by Alex to claim access through forged powers of attorney or declarations of incapacity. Once the trust was established, not even a court order could modify the terms without extraordinary evidence of fraud in its creation. "And believe me," he added, "we will document this process with such a level of detail that it would be impossible to successfully challenge." I asked him about the specific steps needed. Thomas pulled out a new folder and began to outline the plan. "First, we need a complete medical examination performed by independent professionals who certify your full mental capacity. This neutralizes any narrative Alex is building about your supposed dementia. I know Dr. Rebecca White, a neurologist with 30 years of experience, completely impartial. She will conduct exhaustive cognitive evaluations that will be officially recorded. Second step, hire a forensic accountant to accurately value all your assets: the company, the house, bank accounts, investments, any property you may have. We need precise and updated figures to structure the trust properly. It will also allow us to detect if Alex has managed to divert funds that we haven't identified yet," Thomas explained, as he wrote down names of reliable professionals. Third step, draft a completely new will that explicitly revokes any previous version. This will include a specific disinheritance clause against Alex, citing his documented attempts at fraud. Under applicable state law, an heir who attempts against the life, integrity, or assets of the testator can be legally disinherited. Thomas paused significantly. "Are you prepared to make that decision, David? Completely disinheriting your only son is not something that can be easily reversed." I thought of Sarah, of how she had loved Alex unconditionally, of the nights she spent awake when he was a child with a fever, of the tears of pride she shed at his university graduation. But I also thought of Alex's hand, covering my mouth with contempt, of the forged documents, of the meticulous plan to steal not only my money, but my dignity and freedom. "Yes," I replied in a firm voice, I am completely prepared. Alex made his decisions. Now I make mine. Thomas nodded in approval. Then the fourth step will be to designate your granddaughter Valerie as the primary beneficiary of the trust, with the condition that she accesses the full funds upon reaching 25 years of age. In the meantime, we will establish a professional trustee who will manage the assets following strict guidelines that you define now. Pay for her university education, provide her with a reasonable monthly allowance, cover medical emergencies, etc. He also suggested creating an advisory board for the company composed of 3 trusted individuals: himself, my longtime partner, Stephen Norton, who knew the business from us inside out, and an external business consultant. This board would oversee daily operations, make important strategic decisions, and ensure the company continued to generate value until Valerie was ready to assume management responsibilities if she wished. Fifth step, formally document before a notary all the evidence of Alex's attempted fraud. We will make a sworn statement detailing each incident, attaching all physical and digital evidence with witness testimonies where applicable. This document will serve as the basis if you decide to file a criminal complaint, but it will also legally protect the decisions we make regarding your will and the trust. Finally, Thomas recommended updating my advance medical directives. You need a legally binding document that specifies exactly who can make medical decisions if you become temporarily incapacitated and under what circumstances. Obviously, Alex will be explicitly excluded from any authority in that area. We can designate Valerie as your primary representative with Stephen as an alternative if she is unavailable for any reason. We reviewed estimated costs for the complete process, including legal fees, medical evaluations, professional appraisals, and notary procedures. We would be looking at approximately $30,000, a considerable investment, but insignificant compared to the total $700,000 in assets we were protecting. We will start everything this very week, Thomas promised. In 30 days, you will have an absolutely ironclad asset structure that Alex will not be able to penetrate, even with the best lawyers in the city. We said goodbye with another hug, but this time I felt something different in that gesture. It was not just the hug of a lawyer to his client. It was the hug of a friend who understood the devastating pain of having to legally defend yourself against your own son. When I left his office under the winter sun of November, I felt, for the first time in weeks, a sense of regained control over my own life. On Thursday, November the 7th, 3 days after my meeting with Thomas, I received an unexpected call from Alex. His voice sounded unusually cheerful, almost effusive. "Dad, Nicole and I want to invite you to dinner tonight at a renowned upscale restaurant. It's been so long since we've spent quality time together without pressures or tensions. What do you say? We'll pay for everything, of course." The timing struck me as suspicious. Just as I was organizing my legal defense, they decided to organize a reconciliation dinner. I accepted the invitation with apparent gratitude, but immediately called Thomas to inform him. "Perfect," my lawyer said in a strategic tone. "This probably means they're ready to make their definitive move. They're going to try to get you to sign something. Take this with you." He explained that he would send me by urgent messenger a set of documents identical in appearance to standard powers of attorney, but with legally null clauses inserted in fine print that invalidated the entire content. "If they try to get you to sign real documents, you will sign these fake ones I prepared. They will look legitimate at first glance, but they will have no legal value." At 8:30 p.m., I arrived at the restaurant. Famous for its classic dishes, frequented by politicians and businessmen. Alex and Nicole were already seated at a discreet table at the back of the establishment, away from curious glances. He stood up to embrace me effusively. "Dad, it's great to see you. You look very elegant tonight." I was wearing my grey wool suit that Sarah had helped me choose 5 years ago. I only wore it on special occasions. Nicole kissed both my cheeks with artificial warmth, leaving a trail of expensive perfume. "Mr. Miller, we've ordered a bottle of fine Cabernet Sauvignon, your favorite, if I'm not mistaken." Indeed, it was my favorite wine, a detail that surprised me that she remembered, considering her usual disinterest in my personal tastes. We sat down, and for the first 20 minutes, the conversation flowed superficially on safe topics: the winter weather, political news, funny anecdotes about neighborhood residents. We ordered dinner. I chose grilled cod with vegetables. They opted for more elaborate dishes. While we waited, Alex generously filled my wine glass and began to talk about childhood memories. "Do you remember, Dad, when you used to take me to the park on Sundays and buy me chocolate ice cream? I was 6 or 7 years old. Those are some of my happiest memories." His voice acquired a perfectly calibrated, nostalgic tone. Nicole intervened with a melancholic expression. "Mr. Miller, I know these years since you lost Sarah have been terribly hard. Alex and I have talked a lot about how we can best support you. We're sorry we haven't been as present as we should have been." She touched my hand on the table with a maternal gesture. "Sarah was like a second mother to me. She would want us to take care of you now that she's gone." The manipulative mention of Sarah deeply irritated me, but I maintained a neutral expression. Alex continued, "Dad, we've been researching options to make your life easier, less complicated. Managing the company, the house, the finances, all that is a lot of burden for one person your age. Mum wouldn't have wanted to see you stressed by bureaucratic matters when you should be enjoying your golden years." I nodded slowly, taking a sip of wine. "It's true that sometimes I feel overwhelmed," I deliberately lied, playing the role of the tired father they expected to see. I saw them exchange quick glances of satisfaction. They were convinced their strategy was working. The food arrived, and we continued chatting about trivialities while we ate. Alex refilled my glass every time it dropped below half, trying to keep me slightly inebriated, although I barely tasted the wine. After the main course, when coffee and liqueurs were brought, Nicole took an elegant manila envelope from her purse. "Mr. Miller, we've prepared some documents that could significantly simplify your life, just administrative formalities so that we can help you with daily tasks." Alex spread the papers on the table, pushing aside the coffee cups. "Look, Dad, this is a simple financial power of attorney. Basically, it authorizes Nicole and me to manage your bank accounts, pay bills, make necessary transfers. You maintain total control, of course, but we can take care of the daily hassles." He pointed to specific paragraphs with his finger as he spoke, distracting me from reading the full text. The second document was a medical authorization. This simply allows us to speak with your doctors about your health, schedule appointments, pick up medications, nothing invasive, just to make sure you receive the best possible care. His tone was reassuring, paternal, almost as if he were the father, explaining procedures to the confused child. The third paper was more extensive, and this is a consulting agreement where Nicole and I formalize our commitment to help you manage your properties. The family home requires constant maintenance. This document gives us authority to hire repair services, gardening, whatever is necessary, without having to bother you with every small detail. I pretended to examine the documents with a concentrated but slightly confused expression. In reality, I was quickly reading the fine print clauses. The financial power of attorney was extremely broad, granting them powers to sell properties, liquidate accounts, modify insurance beneficiaries. The medical authorization included consent for voluntary admission to psychiatric or geriatric institutions. The consulting agreement gave them almost absolute control over my family home, including authority to sell it if in their professional judgment they considered that the owner can no longer adequately maintain it. "I don't know, Alex. This seems very complicated," I said in a weak voice, feigning insecurity. "Couldn't we just manage things as we have been until now?" Nicole immediately placed her hand on mine. "Mr. Miller, we understand your doubts, but think of Sarah. What would she say if she were here? She would tell you to trust your son, to accept help when it's offered with genuine love." Alex added with barely disguised urgency, "Dad, these documents have already been reviewed by a notary. We just need your signature to activate them. It's a simple legal formality that will allow us to take care of you properly." He took a Montblanc pen from his jacket and placed it next to the papers. "Do it for Mom. Do it for your own peace of mind." I took a deep breath, as if making a difficult decision. Then, slowly, I reached for my own briefcase that I had brought with me. "Let me get my reading glasses," I said, as I searched in the briefcase. In reality, I was taking out the set of fake documents that Thomas had prepared, visually identical to those Alex had presented. I subtly placed them over the real documents, taking advantage of a moment when both looked towards the passing waiter. I took the Montblanc pen and signed the 3 fake documents with my characteristic handwriting. Alex and Nicole watched with barely contained intensity. "Done," I said, handing them the signed papers. "I trust you. Sarah would be happy to know that her son is taking care of his father." Alex took the documents with evident satisfaction, quickly reviewing the signatures, without noticing that they were fake copies prepared by my lawyer. "Dad, you've made the right decision," he said, putting the papers in his own briefcase. Nicole smiled openly, her mask of filial concern momentarily disappearing to reveal pure triumph. We toasted with the liqueurs. They internally celebrated their supposed victory. I silently celebrated having caught them in their own trap. During the taxi ride back home, I took out my phone and sent a message to Thomas. They signed the documents, everything recorded. Because what Alex and Nicole didn't know was that I had a miniature digital recorder in the inside pocket of my jacket that had captured every word of the conversation, every attempt at emotional manipulation, every lie about care and filial concern. 15 days passed after that dinner at the restaurant. During that period, Thomas and I meticulously worked to finalize the structure of the family trust. Dr. Rebecca White had completed my neurological evaluations with perfect results, certifying my full cognitive capacity through international standardized tests. The forensic accountant finished the exhaustive valuation of all my assets, the company valued at $4,000, the house at $850,000, bank accounts totaling $700,000, total assets $550,000. On Wednesday, November 22nd, around 3 p.m., my phone rang. It was Raymond Davis, the bank manager. His voice sounded agitated. "Mr. Miller, I need to inform you about a serious incident that just occurred. Your son was here 20 minutes ago trying to authorize the sale of company shares worth $750,000. He presented documentation that supposedly granted him powers to carry out this operation." My heart raced, although I had already expected something like this. "What kind of documentation?" I asked, keeping my voice controlled. Raymond explained that Alex had shown a financial power of attorney signed by me along with medical certificates alleging my progressive cognitive deterioration. However, our legal department immediately detected multiple irregularities. The clauses of the power of attorney contradicted standard banking protocols. The medical certificates came from a Dr. Carter, who is not registered with the State Medical Board. I thanked him profusely for his diligence and informed him that those documents were completely fraudulent, part of a criminal scheme that was already being handled legally. Mr. Miller, your son became very aggressive when we denied the operation. He threatened to report us to the Securities and Exchange Commission, shouted that we were incompetent, and finally left slamming the door. I must tell you that I am considering filing an official report about this incident. I hung up and immediately called Thomas to inform him. Perfect, my lawyer responded with professional satisfaction. Alex has just committed a blatant crime in front of bank witnesses. This greatly strengthens our position. Get ready, because he will probably come directly to your house in a very agitated, emotional state. He was right. 45 minutes later, I heard the roar of Alex's BMW engine braking sharply in front of my house. The car door slammed violently. Furious footsteps ascended the porch stairs. He didn't even ring the doorbell. He simply turned the knob, which I had deliberately left unlocked, and entered like a storm. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted, bursting into the living room where I was sitting, calmly reading the newspaper. His face was red, veins swollen on his forehead, breathing rapid. The bank just rejected a perfectly legitimate operation. They say the documents are fake. Did you tell them something? Did you call the manager to sabotage me? I remained seated, without moving, carefully folding the newspaper before answering. "Sit down, Alex. You're very agitated." My voice was calm, almost paternal, which seemed to infuriate him even more. "I'm not going to sit down. I want answers now. Those documents you signed 2 weeks ago give me complete legal authority over your finances. Why doesn't the bank recognize them?" "The documents I signed that night at the restaurant have no legal value," I explained in an educational tone, as if I were teaching him basic mathematics. "They were fake copies prepared specifically for this situation. The real documents that you and Nicole tried to make me sign never left the restaurant. I kept them." I watched as his expression changed from fury to confusion and then to horrified comprehension. "What are you telling me? That you tricked us?" His voice rose an octave. The senile old man turned out not to be so senile after all. He approached my chair menacingly. "Well, let me tell you something, Dad. I have other resources. I have legitimate medical certificates confirming your progressive dementia. I have testimonies from neighbors concerned about your erratic behavior. I can initiate a judicial process of incapacitation, and there's nothing you can do to stop me." I remained completely motionless in my chair, the same one Sarah had upholstered with floral patterns during her last months of life. "Alex, those medical certificates from Dr. Carter are fraudulent. That man isn't even a certified doctor. You paid $900 for papers with no legal value whatsoever. I know this because your daughter Valerie told me about that transaction after overhearing your argument with Nicole." His face paled instantly. "Valerie knows nothing. She's just a dramatic teenager," he stammered weakly. "She recorded you discussing the specific details of the plan to fraudulently institutionalize me," I continued in a firm voice. "I have that recording in my lawyer's possession. I also have certified copies of your 3 failed attempts to transfer funds from my bank account through forged signatures, August, September, and October of 2024. Specific dates, exact amounts. Alex took a step back, his arrogance rapidly fading. This is ridiculous. I am your son. Everything I tried to do was for your own good, to protect you from yourself. You're old, confused, vulnerable. Someone has to make rational decisions. His voice sounded desperate now, searching for some narrative to justify his criminal actions. For my own good, I repeated, finally rising from the chair. Although he was taller, my presence filled the space with authority accumulated over 68 years of life. Forging my signature was for my good. Trying to sell my house below its real value was to protect me. Buying fraudulent medical certificates to declare me incapacitated was an act of filial love. You don't understand modern financial realities, he weakly counterattacked. That money trapped in obsolete properties and bank accounts could be generating much greater returns with appropriate investments. I had plans, strategies that would have multiplied your assets. Lie, I interrupted sharply. You had plans to spend it on your luxurious lifestyle while I languished in some expensive residence waiting to die. Silence fell heavily between us. Alex looked around the living room as if searching for additional arguments, but his defeated posture revealed that he knew he had lost. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked in a hollow voice. "An apology? A promise it won't happen again? Tell me what I need to do to fix this." "There's nothing to fix, Alex," I replied, feeling a strange tranquility. "The decisions have already been made. I have completely restructured my assets through an irrevocable family trust. You will receive absolutely nothing when I pass away. Valerie will be the sole beneficiary upon reaching 25 years of age. A professional board will manage the company in the meantime. Everything is legally documented in a way that cannot be challenged." His face reflected absolute shock. "You're disinheriting me for a few simple administrative misunderstandings?" "They weren't misunderstandings," I said, walking towards the front door. "They were deliberate and systematic attempts to steal my autonomy, my dignity, and my assets. Under applicable state law, an heir who attempts against the testator can be legally excluded through a disinheritance clause. That's exactly what I did." "This isn't over," Alex threatened, regaining some of his initial belligerence. "I have lawyers. I can challenge that trust. I can prove that you were manipulated when you were vulnerable after Mom's death." I opened the door completely. "Try it. I have recent neurological evaluations from certified professionals confirming my full capacity. I have all the documentation of your attempted fraud. I have audio recordings where you openly plan to rob me. You have no legal chance." Alex stormed out, but before reaching his car, he turned one last time. "Mom would be devastated seeing you do this, destroying your own family for money." Those words tried to hurt me, but they only revealed his deep disconnection from reality. "Your mother would be devastated seeing what you became," I replied, with genuine sadness. "A man capable of betraying his own father for greed. She raised you better than that, Alex. I raised you better than that." I watched him drive away in his BMW, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling the weight of decades of parenthood collapsing at that moment. I had confronted my son with devastating truths. I had established irrevocable consequences. I felt no victory. I only felt the profound sadness of having done what was necessary when the preferable outcome would have been never having to do it. On Monday, November 26th, exactly 1 month after the public humiliation in my own home, I sent a certified letter to both Alex and Nicole. The text was brief and formal. "You are hereby summoned to a mandatory meeting on Wednesday, November 28th at 11 a.m. at the law office of attorney Thomas Benson, 132 Park Avenue. Subject: testamentary dispositions and resolution of family financial situation. Presence required under possible legal consequences of absence. I arrived at Thomas's office half an hour before the scheduled appointment. I needed to mentally review each point I had to communicate, each piece of evidence I would present, every word I would say. Thomas had prepared the main conference room, a long mahogany table with 8 chairs, a projection screen connected to his laptop, an official audio recorder visibly placed in the center of the table to document everything discussed. At precisely 11 o'clock, the receptionist announced the arrival of Alex and Nicole. They entered with cautious expressions, clearly uncomfortable with the formal setting. Alex wore a dark suit, as if attending a trial. Nicole wore a conservative dress, completely different from her usual flamboyant style. They sat opposite Thomas and me, leaving 2 empty chairs between us as a psychological barrier. "Good morning," Thomas greeted, with cold professionalism. "Thank you for attending promptly. This meeting has been convened by my client, Mr. David Miller, to communicate important legal decisions and present relevant documentation regarding recent events that directly affect family and financial relations." He activated the recorder. "Everything discussed here will be officially recorded for future legal proceedings if necessary." Alex tried to interrupt. "Look, Dad, if this is about our disagreement last week, we can talk about it civilly without lawyers involved." Thomas raised his hand, stopping him. "Mr. Miller, you will listen without interruption. There will be time to respond at the end." His authority filled the room. Alex closed his mouth, crossing his arms defensively. I began to speak in a firm, measured voice. "Alex, Nicole, I have summoned you to formally inform you about irreversible changes in my will and asset structure. These changes are a direct consequence of actions that you carried out during the last 4 months with the intention of defrauding me, stripping me of autonomy, and illegally appropriating assets that I built during 45 years of honest work." Nicole visibly paled. Alex maintained a stony expression, but his hands gripped the arms of the chair with revealing force. Thomas activated the projector, and the first slide appeared. Bank statements showing 3 rejected transfer attempts: August 23rd, September 16th, October 11th, 2024. 3 attempts to divert funds through falsification of the account holder's signature. Amounts: $60,000, $90,000, $140,000 respectively. Total attempted $290,000. The next slide showed high-resolution photographs of the forged medical power of attorney. Document dated October 5th, 2024, supposedly granting full medical powers to Alex Miller. Expert analysis confirms that the signature does not correspond to that of Mr. David Miller. The notary seal presents numerical irregularities incompatible with official state records. Third slide, the preliminary real estate sales contract. Agreement to sell property located on a main city street for $780,000, $70,000 below appraised value. Signed exclusively by Alex Miller without authorization from the legitimate owner. Agent's commission, $45,000. Marginal clause specifies forced relocation of the owner to assisted living before closing. Alex finally exploded. "Those documents are out of context. I was just trying to protect family interests given your obvious mental deterioration." Thomas immediately cut him off. "Silence. You will have an opportunity to speak later." We continued with the fourth slide, showing the receipt for payment of $900 to the fake Dr. Carter for fraudulent medical certifications. This payment was made by bank transfer from from Nicole Smith's personal account on October 30th, 2024. The supposed Dr. Carter is not registered with the State Medical Board. His certifications are completely without legal validity. Nicole began to cry silently, covering her mouth with a trembling hand. Fifth slide, a complete transcription of the recording Valerie had made. The exact words of Alex and Nicole discussing accelerating my institutionalization, quickly liquidating assets, ensuring total control before I complicated things. This recording was legally obtained by a minor in her own family residence. It is completely admissible as evidence in court proceedings. Sixth slide, photographs taken during the dinner at the restaurant, showing the fraudulent documents they tried to make me sign, along with a transcription of the audio recording I had secretly made. Emotional manipulation through repeated references to my deceased wife. Psychological pressure to sign broad-reaching legal documents without allowing adequate review. Attempt to induce a state of alcoholic intoxication through excessive serving of alcohol. Thomas then intervened with absolute legal authority. Based on this documented and verifiable evidence, Mr. David Miller has exercised his right under applicable state law to disinherit his son through a clause of gross misconduct. The grounds include attempted unlawful appropriation of assets, forgery of official documents, conspiracy to unlawfully deprive of liberty, and fraud in multiple manifestations. The next slide showed the new notarized will. Will executed on November the 20th, 2024, before notary Carol White with 3 witnesses present. Explicitly revokes any prior testamentary dispositions. Establishes Valerie Miller as sole universal heir, with full access to assets upon reaching 25 years of age. Alex Miller and Nicole Smith are completely excluded from any financial benefit. Additionally, I continued, my voice resonating in the silent room, I have created an irrevocable family trust with assets valued at $550,000. This trust is administered by a professional board composed of Mr. Thomas Benson, Mr. Stephen Norton, and business consultant Michelle Davis. No legal action you attempt can modify this structure. Alex finally spoke, his voice broken. Dad, I'm your only son. Mom would want you to give me a chance to explain, to compensate for any mistakes I might have made. I leaned forward, looking him directly in the eyes. Alex, I built a business empire from scratch in 45 years. I worked 18-hour days. I loaded boxes until my hands bled. I negotiated contracts in languages I barely spoke. I sacrificed vacations, weekends, time with your mother, all to give you a life I never had. I paused, letting my words sink in. You tried to steal those assets in 45 days. 45 years versus 45 days. That's the difference between a man who builds value and a greedy child who only knows how to take what others created. There is no explanation that justifies betrayal of this magnitude. There is no possible compensation for trying to destroy your own father's dignity. Nicole was openly sobbing. Now Alex had tears streaming down his cheeks, but his expression showed more contained rage than genuine remorse. Thomas placed the last slide. You have 2 options. First, accept these dispositions without legal contestation. Second, force judicial proceedings where all this evidence will be presented publicly with a high probability that the district attorney's office will initiate a criminal investigation that could result in criminal charges with penalties of up to 6 years in prison. The silence that followed was absolute. One could hear the ticking of the antique wall clock. Finally, Alex asked in a hollow voice, "And Valerie already knows all this?" I nodded slowly. "She has been living with me for a week now, with a temporary court order. It will be permanent once the formalities are completed. Your daughter chose integrity over complicity. She chose to protect her grandfather instead of participating in your conspiracy. That decision speaks more about your character than anything I can say." I handed them certified copies of all the documents. "You have 72 hours to formally accept the new testamentary dispositions, or Thomas will initiate full legal proceedings." They rose mechanically, took the envelopes, and left without uttering another word. When the door closed, I collapsed into the chair, feeling decades of tension releasing simultaneously. Thomas placed his hand on my shoulder. "You did well, my friend. You protected what you built and taught the most important lesson a father can give. Actions have consequences." The consequences of that devastating meeting began to materialize with surprising speed. Alex and Nicole signed the formal acceptance of the new testamentary dispositions exactly 68 hours later, on Saturday, December 1st, narrowly avoiding the public judicial proceedings that Thomas had threatened to initiate. But signing documents did not mean that the repercussions of their actions magically disappeared. The first consequence arrived just 3 days after the signing. Raymond Davis, from the bank, filed a formal report with the State Financial Crimes Prevention Commission, detailing the 3 fraudulent transfer attempts Alex had executed. The bank had a legal obligation to report suspicious activities, especially when they involved signature forgery and amounts exceeding $50,000. This report automatically triggered a preliminary investigation by the District Attorney's Office. On Tuesday, December 5th, I received a call from a prosecutor named Ellen Thompson, specializing in financial crimes against the elderly. She requested a meeting to obtain a formal testimony about the events. I attended, accompanied by Thomas, at the downtown courthouse district. For 2.5 hours, I chronologically recounted each incident, while Ellen took meticulous notes on her laptop. I presented certified copies of all the fraudulent documentation. "Mr. Miller, this case presents sufficient elements to proceed with a formal accusation," the prosecutor explained after reviewing the evidence. "We are facing aggravated document forgery, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to unlawfully deprive of liberty. The combined penalty could range from 4 to 7 years of effective prison time, in addition to disqualification from managing others' assets for 10 years. Her words impacted me despite having anticipated them. I asked her about the estimated timelines for the judicial process. Ellen indicated that the investigative phase would take approximately 6 months, during which additional testimonies would be collected, official expert opinions on the forged documents would be carried out, and the formal case would be built. "We will need testimony from your granddaughter Valerie about the recording she made. We will also subpoena the bank manager, the notary who authenticated your legitimate will, and possibly the fake Dr. Carter, if we manage to locate him." While the judicial system began to move slowly, other consequences hit Alex from unexpected directions. Nicole filed for divorce on Thursday, December 7th, alleging marital deception and concealment of criminal activities. According to Valerie, who maintained minimal contact with her mother, Nicole was furious because the failure of the plan meant she would not obtain any financial benefit and also faced potential legal complicity. Mom yelled at Dad that she never would have participated if she knew he was so incompetent at executing a simple plan. Valerie recounted sadly during a dinner at home. She said she married expecting financial stability, and he had dragged her into a legal disaster because of his arrogance and stupidity. The divorce proceeded quickly because Nicole had hired aggressive lawyers determined to protect her own personal assets from any consequences derived from Alex's actions. The administrative council of my company, now formally constituted with Thomas, Stephen, and Michelle, convened an extraordinary meeting on Monday, December 11th. The topic, Alex's position within the company. Although I had founded and built the business, technically, Alex held a management position with a monthly salary of $11,000 and additional benefits valued at approximately $3,500 per month. Stephen presented the case with concrete data. Alex has not contributed significantly to business operations in the last 18 months. His office attendance averages 6 hours per week. He has not closed any new contracts since January 2024. His annual salary of $175,000 represents pure cost without productive return. Michelle added that keeping him created reputational risks considering the ongoing criminal investigation. We unanimously voted for his immediate removal from the management position, effective December 15th. Thomas drafted the formal notification, citing loss of fiduciary trust and conduct incompatible with corporate values. This meant Alex lost not only the $11,000 monthly, but also private health insurance, company car, annual bonuses, and any possibility of future income derived from the family business. Valerie informed me that her father had tried to find employment at 3 competitor companies during December, but news of the prosecutor's investigation was already circulating discreetly in metropolitan business circles. No one wanted to hire someone potentially facing criminal charges for fraud against his own father. The corporate world is small, and reputation is everything. Alex's financial situation quickly collapsed. Without a company's salary, facing considerable legal expenses for his criminal defense and simultaneous divorce, he had to sell his BMW and move from his 3-bedroom apartment in an upscale area to a more modest studio in a less affluent neighborhood. Nicole kept the family home through a temporary court order, arguing that Valerie needed stability during her senior year of high school, although the girl already lived permanently with me. On December 21st, 3 weeks after the confrontational meeting, Stephen called me with unexpected information. David, I just found out through a contact at the Bar Association that Alex tried to sell confidential company information to one of our main competitors. He offered client databases, exclusive supplier contracts, detailed profit margins, all for $90,000 in immediate cash. My heart sank. Even after everything that had happened, a microscopic part of me had harbored hope that Alex would eventually reflect, understand the magnitude of his mistakes, and seek genuine redemption. This news definitively destroyed that hope. The competitor accepted the offer? I asked. Stephen shook his head. Anthony Mendez called me personally indignant. He said he would never do business with someone capable of betraying his own father and family business. He rejected the proposal and warned me immediately. We added this incident to the judicial file as additional evidence of Alex's character. Prosecutor Ellen Thompson considered that it strengthened the case about his pattern of systematic fraudulent conduct. This demonstrates that his actions were not isolated errors, but manifestations of a consistent criminal mentality, she explained during our next meeting. On Christmas Eve, Valerie received a text message from her father. I lost everything because of the selfish old man. I hope you're happy living with your grandfather while your father lives in misery. Someday you'll understand that I only wanted to secure our future. She showed me the message, with tears in her eyes. Grandpa, does he really believe he's a victim in this whole situation? I hugged her as she cried. There are people who never accept responsibility for their own decisions, darling. They always find someone else to blame. Your father chose every step of this path. He forged documents. He tried to rob me. He conspired to take away my freedom. Those were his choices. The consequences he now faces are the natural result of those choices, not unjust punishments imposed by a cruel father. We spent Christmas Eve, just the two of us, preparing dinner together in my kitchen, where Sarah had cooked thousands of family meals for decades. Valerie set the table with the special tablecloth her grandmother reserved for important occasions. We toasted with non-alcoholic cider in crystal glasses that had belonged to Sarah's parents. "Grandpa," Valerie said after dinner, as we washed dishes side by side, "thank you for teaching me that doing the right thing is more important than maintaining false family peace. Thank you for showing me that integrity is worth more than any amount of money." Her words filled me with a paternal pride that Alex would never manage to inspire. That night, before sleeping, I took out an old photograph of Sarah and me taken in 1978. A year before founding the company. We were so young, so full of hope, so naive about the challenges we would face. "I did well, my love," I whispered to the photograph. "I protected what we built together and found someone worthy of inheriting our legacy." 6 months have passed since that night of October 26th, when my son covered my mouth in front of 40 guests. Today is May 2025, and as I write these lines from the study I shared with Sarah for so many years, I can say with absolute certainty that I made the right decisions. Valerie lives permanently with me. The judge approved full legal custody on February 15th, after evaluating her family situation and confirming that she had voluntarily chosen to reside with her grandfather. Nicole did not raise significant objections, probably relieved not to have parental responsibilities that would complicate her divorce process. The girl is currently in her last semester of high school with outstanding grades. She has been accepted into a prestigious university to study business administration and demonstrates every day the exceptional maturity she inherited from her grandmother. Our domestic routine has naturally established itself with complementary rhythms. I get up at 7 a.m., prepare coffee while listening to the news, and eat breakfast, reading the newspaper at the same table where Sarah used to serve me toast with orange marmalade. Valerie comes down around 7:30, always punctual, already dressed in her school uniform. We have breakfast together, talking about her academic plans, school projects, or simply sharing the comfortable silence that only exists between people who genuinely enjoy each other's company. On weekends, we visit Stephen at his country home outside the city. He has taken on an almost additional grandfather role for Valerie, teaching her practical aspects of the import business that I managed for 45 years. He explains negotiations with European suppliers, sustainable profit margins, inventory management, diplomatic relations with difficult clients. Valerie absorbs every lesson with intense concentration, taking notes in a notebook Stephen gave her with the initials VM engraved on the leather cover. "Your grandfather built something extraordinary from scratch," Stephen tells her during these mentoring sessions, but building is only half the challenge. Maintaining, growing, adapting to new markets, that requires strategic vision that is learned with time and dedication. "You have the advantage of starting with solid foundations," he established, "but you will have to prove that you deserve that legacy through constant work and intelligent decisions. The company operates efficiently under the administration of the board we established. Michelle Davis has implemented modern management systems that have increased operational productivity by 17% during the first quarter. Stephen oversees relationships with historical suppliers while simultaneously exploring new markets in Eastern Europe. Thomas ensures that all legal aspects remain impeccable and transparent. The financial numbers for the first quarter of 2025 show healthy growth of 9% compared to the same period last year. Regarding Alex, the situation has evolved predictably. The criminal process advances with the slowness characteristic of the American judicial system. The investigative phase concluded in April after collecting testimonies from 17 different witnesses, documentary expert opinions from 5 independent experts, and forensic analyses of all questioned bank transactions. Prosecutor Ellen Thompson filed a formal accusation for 3 crimes: aggravated public document forgery, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to unlawfully deprive of liberty. The trial is scheduled for September 2025. Alex's defense lawyer tried to negotiate a plea bargain where my son would admit guilt in exchange for a reduced sentence, but the prosecution rejected any negotiation, demanding a full trial given the systematic gravity of the crimes. According to Thomas, the probability of effective conviction exceeds 85%, considering the volume of irrefutable documentary evidence. Alex has tried to contact me 7 times since January. 4 phone calls from unknown numbers that I didn't answer, 2 handwritten letters delivered by certified mail that I returned unopened, and an unannounced appearance at my door one Sunday morning that I resolved by simply not opening it when I looked through the peephole and saw him standing there for 20 minutes before finally leaving. I feel no cruel satisfaction in rejecting these contacts. I simply understand that some lessons need to be fully experienced in absolute solitude to generate genuine transformation, if such transformation is even possible. Valerie occasionally asks about her father. Do you think someday he will truly understand what he did wrong, Grandpa? I answer honestly, I don't know, darling. Some people eventually achieve clarity about their mistakes after years of consequences. Others never do, remaining perpetually convinced that the world treated them unfairly. Your father will choose which of those paths to take. We cannot force that growth. We can only protect ourselves from his destructive decisions while he decides what kind of man he wants to be. The divorce between Alex and Nicole was finalized in March. She obtained shared custody of Valerie on paper, although the practical reality is that the girl lives with me with judicial approval and visits her mother bi-weekly out of obligation rather than desire. Nicole resumed her maiden name, sold the marital apartment, and from indirect comments, I hear she is dating a bank executive 20 years her senior. Some patterns never change. I have updated my will once more in April, this time adding specific provisions for Valerie's university education. The trust fully covers her tuition at a major university, books, materials, and a monthly allowance of $1,200 for personal expenses while she studies. Upon reaching 25 years of age in 2034, she will receive full access to the assets which by then, if current economic projections hold, will have grown to approximately $6,000, considering conservative investments and sustained business growth. This afternoon, after Valerie returned from school, we sat in the backyard garden, where Sarah cultivated roses during springs and summers. The plants have bloomed beautifully this year, almost as if she was still here, caring for them. "Grandpa," Valerie said, as she gently plucked petals from a white rose, "do you regret having to do all this? Disinheriting Dad, the trial, all the legal complications?" I thought carefully before answering. "I regret that it was necessary. I regret that your father chose a path that required such severe responses. But I do not regret the decisions I made to protect myself and to protect what your grandmother and I built during almost 50 years of marriage. If I had allowed his actions to go without consequences, I would have taught him that betraying family comes without a price. That would have been the true cruelty, allowing him to continue destroying without limits." She nodded thoughtfully. "Grandma would be proud of you." "Grandma would be devastated by what Alex became," I gently corrected. "But I do believe she would approve of how I handled the situation. Sarah valued integrity above all else. She taught me that doing the right thing often hurts, but not doing it hurts much more in the long run." As the sun sets over the city on this quiet May afternoon, I reflect on the distance traveled since that humiliating October night. I transformed the most painful moment of my old age into an opportunity to teach the most important lesson a father can impart. Actions have real consequences. Respect must be earned continually, even within families. And personal dignity is not subject to negotiation, no matter the circumstances. My son tried to reduce me to a useless old man whose mouth could be covered with impunity. He discovered instead that that old man had learned over 68 years of life that true strength resides not in shouts or public humiliations, but in strategic patience, meticulous preparation, and an unshakable will to defend what was built with decades of honest sacrifice. The legacy that Sarah and I created is now secure in the hands of someone who understands its true value. That is the only victory that matters. Everything else is simply the necessary consequences of decisions that others freely made and must now fully live with.